Hello. In today's video, I want to talk about how vulnerability is a strength. It sounds like a paradox. Maybe you've heard it before. I'm a child of the 80s and the 90s, and many people, but specifically boys and men, had to act tough, act strong, like we didn't have feelings, we didn't have emotions, we didn't have weaknesses. We had a shield up, and we were strong. And this is how I lived my life for a long time. But in reality, we all have fears. We all have emotions. We all have feelings. We all have weaknesses. We all have things we have to improve on. Everyone does. People that act like they don't, especially in today's social media world, are just faking it. And if you're faking it, and worse yet, if you don't even notice it, that real weakness is around you. You just don't notice it. So that makes you more vulnerable to attacks from other people. It's like you have a big hole in your armor and a soft spot is showing and you're not even aware of it. And we all have these soft spots, is what I'm trying to tell you. The strength is in embracing that, realizing it. Once you realize it, you can do what you need to do to work through it, process those feelings, integrate them into the rest of your mind, and then you're not so vulnerable to the outside world. So, paradoxically, being vulnerable is a strength because it's the first step to realizing what your weaknesses and flaws are. And again, we all have them. One vulnerability that I think is important is telling on yourself. I've talked a lot about radical honesty, never lying unless somebody's in like serious trouble and you have to protect them. But radical honesty, part of that is telling on yourself. I like to make a culture around me, friends, family, work, where telling on yourself is a great thing. If you mess up or if you have a problem, just tell on yourself, genuinely share that. We make it okay, we make it a strength, and you don't get in trouble for it. You don't get ridiculed for it, you get celebrated for it. Again, that's the only way you can acknowledge it and work on it because we're all super flawed. So I recommend that you try to make a culture of being honest and telling on yourself amongst everybody in your friend and family circle. People can really tell authenticity from being fake. And even if it's a culture shock at first, over time, people gravitate towards and appreciate authenticity. One warning that applied to myself: if you go from all intellectual and not dealing with your emotions, when you first start working on that, you're probably going to overcorrect to the other side of the spectrum. You're going to feel raw, and some emotions will leak or explode out sometimes. That's natural and it's okay. You shouldn't fear that. Obviously, it's not ideal, and that's not where you want to end up. Over time, it will regulate somewhere in the middle. You want to have access to your emotions. You want to be able to use them as a tool like fire. You can burn down your house or you can cook a steak. The worst thing we can do is ignore our feelings. They build up, they'll bubble cortisol and inflame your whole body. You won't be a fully realized person, and you'll eventually die early of a bunch of inflammatory diseases. You also don't want to be on the other extreme where you're just exploding and out of control, unreliable. No one will feel safe around you. No one will have confidence in you. So those are extremes. But again, right at first, it may waver a bit, and that's normal and it's okay. As you keep being authentic and sharing how you feel and acknowledging and working on it, you will regulate somewhere in a comfortable middle. One good example of vulnerability being a strength is in the movie 8 Mile, where Eminem was doing battle raps, and at the end, one of his verses, he just said all of his weaknesses, right? And he took all the ammunition away from his opponent. And then when it was his opponent's turn, he just didn't have anything. He wore his vulnerability as armor. And then now that I've healed and seen that, I wear my vulnerability as armor. I tell on myself. I am honest. I acknowledge my feelings. I use them appropriately as a tool as I need them. And remember, we all have these vulnerabilities. We all have these emotions. We all have a shadow in us. And if you ignore it, it's not going to be armor. It's going to end up being a weighted vest and pulling you down. So try to embrace your vulnerability and stay as authentic as possible. All right, everybody, take care.